Welcome to Channel's Business Globe with me, Juliana Olayinka from our studios here in London. On today's episode, arrested, fingerprinted and publicly humiliated. The former US President Donald Trump has made an unprecedented appearance in a Manhattan courthouse, entering not guilty pleas to 34 separate charges relating to the $130,000 in hush money paid in October 2016 to the adult film actress Stormy Daniels. Greg Swenson, the chairman of Republicans Overseas UK, will be joining me here in our London studios, where I'll be asking him what Donald Trump's arrest could mean for the future of the American judicial system. And the Israeli judicial system is also under the global microscope right now, amid a series of widespread protests. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced a delay to his government's controversial plans, which would give the Israeli parliament the ability to override court decisions. Mike Cushman, the membership secretary of Jewish Voice for Labour, will also be here with me in the studio, giving his assessments on the nation's developing political crisis. Then later, we'll be looking back at some of the biggest business news stories of the week. Now, before we speak with our business correspondent Simon Pusey, let's have a look back at another major story that has been at the centre of British discourse this week. TikTok has been fined £12.7 million for illegally having more than 1 million under-13s on its platform. According to the findings from Britain's Information Commissioner's Office, the hugely popular video sharing platform did not do enough to check who was using the app and did not take sufficient action to remove underage children. It is illegal in the UK for social media sites to process the data of children under 13 without the consent of their parents. A TikTok spokesperson said the ICO case is related to historic periods and it has removed more than 17 million underage users from its apps in the last quarter of 2022 alone. To other major news, the husband of the former First Minister of Scotland was arrested by police on Wednesday morning as part of a fraud investigation into the Scottish National Party. Peter Murrell, who quit as the SNP chief executive in a row over membership numbers, was interviewed by detectives regarding complaints about referendum funds being misappropriated. He has been married to Nicola Sturgeon since 2010. Last month, Sturgeon stood down as First Minister and was recently succeeded by Humza Yousaf.
I was told this morning after the event, and of course my reaction, as you'd imagine, much like anybody involved in the SNP, is that this is a difficult day for the party. But again, I just reiterate and emphasise it's so important for me not to comment on a live police investigation and be seen to prejudice that in any way, shape or form.
Well, for more on Nicola Sturgeon's husband's arrest, I was earlier joined in the studio by our business correspondent Simon Pusey. Simon, politicians, police, pantomime, not referring to Donald Trump, actually referring to the husband of the former First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, who was arrested as part of a fraud investigation into the Scottish National Party. It was a quiet news week in the UK. This is clearly a shocking development.
Yeah, so he's called Peter Murrell and, like you say, Nicola Sturgeon's husband. And I think people make the link there between her very shock and sudden resignation about a month ago, and they will maybe make the link as to were these two connected. Did she resign as a result of this investigation?
Knowing it was coming up.
Exactly, but that's something that we can't confirm or deny, and we also can't confirm or deny that he's going to be charged or that he's guilty at all. He's only just been arrested. There are 10 police officers stationed outside his house at the moment. He's held the position of chief executive of the party since 1999, and then he resigned himself a couple of months ago because of a different scandal. This was about him giving his communications chief wrong figures about the party's membership, which has been falling recently. And so the communications chief then resigned, and then he resigned soon after. So this has all been a bit of a mess for the SNP, and this is what we were talking about when we were talking about Humza Yousaf, who's recently been elected. He's been forced to sort of deny that the SNP are in crisis because they were in such a strong position before Nicola Sturgeon resigned. Now party figures of numbers are falling. Now you've got this crisis, and then you had that whole election saga where they were sort of taking bits out of each other, big swipes and things. So the SNP have been so strong for so long, with the polling suggesting that more people now want to leave the UK than ever before. And so this is the last thing they could really do. Humza Yousaf has recently said that the SNP will cooperate with the investigation and that the sooner we can get a conclusion to the case, the better. But it's not a good look, because you want a unified party, of course. They'll still win more seats at general elections than any other party, but they were sailing high, and then suddenly it all seems to be coming down. So, like I said, we need to sort of wait and see what the actual case against him is, but it is in connection with an investigation into Scottish National Party finances. So he was the chief executive. He resigned over giving wrong figures in terms of the number of membership to the head of communications, but this is all about party finances. We don't know any more about that. Yes. We don't know if he's going to be charged, but it's not a good look for the SNP, because it's scandal after scandal at the moment, and what they need is, to take on the UK Westminster government to try and get independence, which is what they're all about. They need to have a strong and cohesive and respectable, reliable, professional outfit, and at the moment they are anything but that.
Absolutely. It's a police investigation, so there's only so much we can discuss, but not a great start for Humza Yousaf, who of course we know was a staunch ally of Nicola Sturgeon. I'm sure you'll be bringing us updates when you have them, Simon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Well, to other major news now. Donald Trump's historic arrest and appearance at a Manhattan courthouse prompted massive global media coverage this week. The 34 felony charges all arise from the former US president allegedly reimbursing a lawyer $130,000 for hush money paid in October 2016 to the adult film actress Stormy Daniels. Donald Trump pleaded not guilty to the charges and described himself as a victim of the judiciary system, which is being weaponized against him.
As it turns out, virtually everybody that has looked at this case, including rhinos and even hardcore Democrats, say there is no crime and that it should never have been brought. Never have been brought. Everybody. Even people that aren't big fans have said it. They said this is not the right thing to do. It's an insult to our country, as the world is already laughing at us for so many other reasons, like our open borders.
For more on Donald Trump's unprecedented arrest, I was earlier joined in the studio by Greg Swenson, the founding partner of the investment firm Brigg McAdam and the spokesperson of Republicans Overseas UK. Greg Swenson, we've only passed the first quarter of 2023, but I think unprecedented, yet again, is going to top the Google search for what we're discussing at the moment, because it has been an unprecedented week. Away from the cinematic visuals,
right,
the media spectacle,
the circus,
the pantomime participation of the public, the former US president is potentially facing over 100 years in prison. I just want your take, Greg, on the whole situation that has engulfed the world's media over the past few days.
Yeah, it was a really sad day for the country yesterday. This is a complete weaponization of the justice system. It's really sad to see. So you said potentially, 100 years in jail. I don't think any of these things are going to stick. Only the most rabid Trump derangement syndrome activists are saying there's any merit to the case. It created the circus, but I think that, indicting him for these misdemeanors, connecting the dots.
Are they misdemeanors?
Yeah.
They're felonies.
No, they're not. I mean, he was indicted as, for felonies, but it's a real stretch to connect the dots from a misdemeanor, which is the law in New York for campaign finance violations or falsifying business records. But connecting it to campaign finance is a real stretch. There has to be intent. And it's really...
Well, the intent was to keep people quiet, allegedly.
Oh, exactly. But that's not illegal, right? So hush money is not illegal. It's using campaign funds, which he did not, or using it to influence a campaign or an election. It's a real stretch. It's why the Justice Department decided not to proceed with the case last year. It's why his predecessor, granted with pressure from the Justice Department, decided not to pursue it. And even Alvin Bragg chose not to pursue this until Trump announced his candidacy in December. And then the activists left. There was a Obama administration official who joined the DA's office in December, and he's not a prosecutor, he's not a public defender. So there was all this pressure from the activist left on Alvin Bragg, and that's why he proceeded with it. But it's really without merit, and you're seeing that even from, this is what I have to be clear about. You can be a critic of Trump. You can choose not to vote for him, and many people are going to choose that. But that doesn't mean that this is not an outrage, and that this weaponization of justice isn't wrong. So you're seeing Jeb Bush, an archenemy of Trump, all of his opponents in the primaries, starting with Ron DeSantis, but Mike Pence included, have been very critical of this. And then you have Andrew Cuomo, former Democratic governor of New York, Alan Dershowitz, criticizing this whole process. So, you don't have to be a supporter of Trump to understand that this is bad news for America. And I think you'll see some repercussions, some unintended consequences from the right. And I hate to see that. My goal, and I would hope the media's goal, in following presidential elections or any elections, is to just tell the truth and expose things that need to be exposed so the voters can decide. So whether it's the Hunter Biden laptop or payments from China, okay, those should be public and those should be discussed. And if you think that there was some shady dealings, then don't vote for the person. But I don't want to see red state district attorneys or red state activist prosecutors going after the Biden family and putting them in jail. That's just not right. And I'd be just as critical of Alvin Bragg if he was doing this to Joe Biden.
It's interesting that you say that about Biden and not wanting Hunter going to jail. A lot of supporters wanted Hillary Clinton to go to jail,
lock her up.
Including Donald Trump.
I didn't think that was responsible.
But he did say
that, right? And nothing happened of it. She was not indicted. There was no pre-dawn raids on her home in Chappaqua. And you can argue that her violations were much worse because, she erased 30,000 emails. They used that cleanser, that electronic cleanser. They smashed some iPhones. This was really blatant stuff. And again, I'm not here to decide, I'm not here for whataboutism, but there's clearly some hypocrisy and unequal applications here from the Justice Department, from the DAs. So it's really hard to argue for Alvin Bragg's case. And I think you'll see that. This thing could be dismissed easily by a judge.
We've gone a long way, haven't we?
Yeah, maybe not till December, but anything can happen between now and then. And, this would never survive an appeals court and probably would never find a conviction outside of Manhattan. Remember, the jury pool in Manhattan voted for Biden 84.5%. So I'm not sure there could be a fair trial there, but if it is tried there, I'm not suggesting that you couldn't find a jury to convict because they really hate Trump in Manhattan. But should you go to jail because people hate you? No,
clearly not. Although if he is found guilty of the 34 charges against them, he has pleaded not guilty.
Right.
Is this then an attack on democracy if the evidence is there?
If the evidence is there, but it's not. And it was interesting. There were no surprises yesterday. With 34 indictments, I was thinking maybe there's some smoking gun in there, some new evidence, some new witness, and there really wasn't. So I'm not worried about this trial. I'm worried that this will continue. They've been trying this for 7 years, and I'm not a huge Trump supporter. I'm just suggesting that the minute he won the election, even before he did in 2016, the so-called resistance, not healthy, something you'd expect in a former Soviet Union satellite state, or in South America, but not in America. The resistance has been trying this. The Russia collusion hoax, which, by the way, Hillary paid a fine, a campaign finance fine. It's treated as a misdemeanor. Slap on the wrist, she paid a few $1,000s for paying with campaign funds for the Russia collusion hoax story, through the Steele dossier. So, should she go to jail for that? No, I would hope not. But this is what's going to happen. This is what you'll see in the future, and it's really unhealthy.
I know you are going to be an incredibly busy man over the next few months. Greg Swenson.
Great to be here.
Founding partner of investment firm Brigg McCadden, also chairperson, Republicans Overseas UK. Right. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks a lot, Juliana.
In a few moments, I'll be throwing back to an interview I did with Mike Cushman about the Israeli government's attempts to weaken its judiciary system. But until then, here's Teniola Oyetayo with a breakdown of the biggest business news stories of the week.
More strike dates have been announced after teachers in England rejected the government's new pay offer. Members of the National Education Union in England will strike on Thursday, the 27th of April, and Tuesday, the 2nd of May. Meanwhile, talks to resolve a long-running dispute between Royal Mail and staff members over pay and conditions have also collapsed. The Communication Workers Union has said it's willing to continue negotiations. Royal Mail has warned that a return to industrial action by the CWU could result in the company going into administration. UK-based online store Book Depository is being closed down by its parent company, the US technology giant Amazon. Book Depository has told customers it will cease operations later this month after almost 2 decades in business. It comes after Amazon announced plans to cut thousands of jobs as it shakes up its businesses globally. And British billionaire Sir Richard Branson's rocket company, Virgin Orbit, has filed for bankruptcy in the US after failing to secure new investment. The satellite launch company halted operations weeks ago, but it hopes to find a buyer for the business. The company, based in California, announced last week that it would cut 85% of its 750-strong workforce. Teniola Oyetayo for Channels Business Global.
Thanks, Tenny. Now, after weeks of turbulence over the Israeli government's attempts to weaken its judiciary, the controversial package is in trouble. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's poll numbers have sunk, secular opponents have discovered their voice, and the ultra-Orthodox have gone quiet in fear of backlash. Mike Cushman, the membership secretary of Jewish Voice for Labour, was my guest here in the studio earlier today, where he gave me his assessment on the nation's developing political crisis. Mike Cushman, it's a pleasure to have you in the Channels Business Global studio today. Yet again, we're seeing political turmoil in Israel. I know there have been some clashes, but we'll avoid that for now to talk about Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I was actually reading in the FT this week that the turmoil could chop off 4.3% of GDP. Are these reforms that I know have been delayed, but he's still trying to usher in, is this basically to avoid him getting any jail time?
Well, we have to go back a stage. It's why is the coalition in existence? The coalition is in existence because Netanyahu wanted to recruit anybody and everybody who would enable him to become prime minister again so that he could then avoid jail time. I mean, we've seen it in this country with Johnson. We see it in America with Trump. There's real similarities about politicians who will do anything to avoid being held to account for their actions because there are major corruption trials going on. Case 1000, case 2000, case 3000, case 4000 about submarines, about gifts, about the spending patterns of Sarah Netanyahu. And I mean, I'm not in the court, so I don't hear all the evidence, but everything I read says the guy's banged to rights. And so, election before last, he managed to get the extreme right parties to form an electoral front, which would get them over the 5% hurdle for getting representation in the Knesset in the Israeli parliament. So Netanyahu empowered the far-right racists in order to try to get into government. He didn't quite manage it last time. This time, because there was more fragmentation in the opposition, a trivial majority of votes got him a significant majority in the Knesset, but only with the support of these very far-right parties.
Mike, how serious is this? Because there is so much going on, geopolitically. Again, we've had the issue with Trump. We've got a war in Ukraine. I suppose it's not getting as much global headlines as the story would if it was a slow news year. But there are some suggestions. Some of the observers are saying that this is going to change Israel forever. In fact, if these judicial reforms go through, this could be the end of a lot of the freedoms that so many people enjoy in the country.
Well, I mean, the surprising thing is where we're seeing the opposition from the high-tech elite. And Israel's a major player in high tech.
And Joe
Biden? Well, maybe not. It's not. He's saying, well, it's not very nice, Benjamin, but I don't really want to do anything about it. But the people who are taking out, the tech entrepreneurs are moving their money out of Israel. And the military are entirely unhappy. We have the elite of the military, the Air Force, the A200, the cyber security division, all saying, we don't like this. And because Israel depends not just on its conscripts, but on reservists who come in and do a month a year, the reservists are refusing to do their reserve service. So there are major threats, as well as the mass of people on the street. But what do these people want? What they're afraid of is, we've had the occupation going on, well, you could say from 48, you can say from 67, choose your starting point, but going on for decades, with the world not paying attention. Because of what's going on now, the world is paying attention to what Israel is doing in the occupied territories. And what these people want to do, they want to get back to occupation as normal. They don't want to end the occupation. They just want to get back to nice, quiet, house demolition, land seizure, settler attacks, which everyone ignores. But the spotlight that's come on because of people who Netanyahu has in the government, who are outrageously overt fascists, people like Ben-Gvir, people like Smotrich.
Well, they're certainly right-wing, and there's certainly extremists in some of their thoughts. We are running out of time, but I've got to ask you. You said what do the protesters want? I suppose they don't want these reforms. The reforms have been delayed. Is this a win for the protesters?
Well, in exchange for the delay, Ben-Gvir was given a personal militia. I mean, his own stormtroopers. The question is, what colour shirts are they going to wear? I mean, it's horrible. We do see resonances of what's gone on in Europe in the 20s and 30s, of building up armed gangs on the direction of a politician, terrorising people who they oppose. I mean, there are at least half a dozen law changes they want to do. They want to control judicial appointments. Now, the difference between each of these things is not unique to Israel. Judicial appointments we know are controlled politically in America.
Yes.
They want to get rid of judicial review, where the courts can say, are the government's actions legal under the laws of the country? They're trying to scrap that. The Conservatives are trying to scrap that in Britain. But the difference is, in Israel, the executive is part of the legislature, so as it is in Britain, but in Israel, it's unicameral. There's only one House of Parliament. There's not even a appointed House of Lords to ride roughshod over them. And if they control judicial appointments, all three branches of government are under control of the Prime Minister.
Is it going to happen, Mike?
My crystal ball is very cloudy. I think there is a fair chance it will run into the buffers. But then I say we're back to occupation as normal, the ability of the security forces to terrorise Palestinians. I mean, we had this, the settlers are so empowered at the moment. The Hawara massacre, where they raided this village, murdered 30 people, and there's virtually no holding to account.
And
the army stood by and let it happen.
Well, you know, those are serious allegations.
They are well substantiated. If you read Haaretz, if you read Jerusalem Post, if you read Times of Israel, it's all documented there.
I don't, but I've got a Jewish expert in the studio with me, and it's been great speaking with you, Mike. I'm so sorry that we've run out of time. We've got to bring you back because this is something that is an important topic, and of course it has ramifications across the globe, considering the importance of Israel. Mike Cushman, Membership Secretary at Jewish Voice for Labour. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today. But as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Do have a lovely Easter.